Hey guys, welcome back. So before we start today's video, just want to give a massive thank you and a shout out to everyone who has been subscribing for the past few weeks. Still a while to go with this channel, but I'm really proud of the effort. I'm really thankful to each and every one of you who come back time after time. So obviously this is going to be the last video of 2024. Really thankful for your support. So if you can just continue sharing and liking the videos, leave a comment down below. I always get back to you guys, always read your comments. Obviously you've probably seen a few of the negative ones, but it's to be expected, right? I'm not going to be appreciated by everyone, but for those of you who do appreciate me, I really appreciate your time. So on today's case, we're going to be discussing Interpol's most wanted woman, someone who's been linked to a lot of terrorism charges, but for the past 10 years, no one's seen hide or hair of her. No one knows where she is, even if she's alive at this point. So the reason I chose this one, it's mainly just to highlight the dangers that these people obviously possess. We all know that, but it's very rare for a woman in this particular religion to facilitate these kind of things. It's usually a position that's held by men, because a lot of the times when it comes to certain members of this community, obviously they don't hold women at the regard as what they hold men to. Not all of them, but like I said, just a small minority. But you get that in every minority, every community group. There's always someone who's the bottom of the pile. And unfortunately, in some cultures and in some communities, it does tend to be women that are seen as the less favourable than what a man would be. Now, another reason is I don't want this to be an attack on the religion. Like I said, obviously in regards of a video I done a few weeks ago, I have nothing but respect. Don't get me wrong, when I was a lot younger, I did have a few prejudices held against the population that we're going to be talking about against the people that we're going to be talking about, and that was mainly because of just stuff that obviously I was consuming in the papers. It wasn't until that I met a few of these people that I realised they're just like you and you're right. They want to live in peace. Unfortunately, it's just a small minority that spoil that for them. And it's a real shame that obviously everyone in the group get targeted with the same brush, because we don't do that when it comes to Catholics, for example. We don't go around telling every Catholic person that they're a bomber or they're a paedophile because of what's gone on in the past in regards to the Catholic Church or the IRA, for example. So why do we do the same to the Muslim population or Muslim people and Islam in general? Why do we go around and tell them that they are suicide bombers, that, you know, when it's just, unfortunately, a small minority? If you don't understand, obviously, what Islam is about, like, I get it, but talk to a Muslim person, talk to someone who follows that religion, the Islamic religion. You will educate yourself and realise, yeah, this person's not as bad as I initially thought. And that's what happened to me, and I completely changed my belief system about it. And I will support anyone where it's necessary. I learn from past behaviours, and I think that's just what people need. They need, not everyone, but a certain group of people, they just need to have themselves educated on the belief system and actually speak to someone who does follow that religion. So with that all said and done, today's case we're going to be talking about Samantha Lewthwaite. So like I said, she is Interpol's most wanted woman, and what that entails is obviously all going to come out during this story. I'm guaranteed it's one that you're probably not 100% over. You may have heard the name darted around in a few different stories, but like I said, obviously no one's seen or heard from Samantha since 2014, so it's probably something that's kind of escaped your memory maybe, but when I get into the story you'll probably start remembering a few bits. So with all that said and done, just a massive thank you as always, and let's get into the story. So Samantha Louise Lewthwaite, she was born on the 5th of December 1983, and this was to her parents Andrew and Elizabeth Lewthwaite, and she was born in Banbridge in Northern Ireland. So Andrew at that point, so he originally was from the UK, and he gets stationed over in Northern Ireland during the war. He then meets Elizabeth while he's touring the UK in his soldier position, in his army position, sorry. And eventually, after the war ends, the family relocate to Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire, and they go on to have their children. They go on to have Samantha. And originally they brought their family up to be Christians. They followed up in the Christian religion. But Samantha, she grew really, really close. As she was getting a little bit older in her childhood years, she becomes really, really close with a young Muslim girl who lived opposite her. And these two were described as inseparable. Went everywhere together. Samantha was seen as a permanent fixture in that particular house. I don't know the girl's name, but Samantha was a particular frequent visitor to the house. And Samantha would go there and seek solace and seeking peace, because Elizabeth and Andrew, they had a lot of struggles while Samantha was growing up. And they later divorced in 1994. And Samantha, she found solace in her friend's house, like I said, in the religion, and being around religion. She believed that her friend had a stronger family unit than what she had. The former mayor of Aylesbury, his name was Raj Khan. So he was a distant member of this particular family. So obviously he would go around, because something about Muslim families is they are very tight and close knit. So you'll always have frequent visits from family members who are described as distant. You know, your distant uncle, your distant aunt, or whatever. So he was an uncle of the family, and he would make frequent visits. And Raj says that he would have described Samantha as your typical sort of innocent English rose. So at the age of 12, Samantha, she starts secondary school. She was described as passionate and just your typical teenager who cared about social injustice. And it was during 2001, during her A-level year, so September 11th, 2001, a day that everyone remembers, a day that everyone can sit back and think, oh, I know where I was that day. Obviously 9/11 happened. One of the worst tragedies that have happened in many, many years, claimed the lives of over 2,000 people in New York. And then not long after that, the war on Afghanistan began. And this drew Samantha deeper into studying Islam. and studying the religion. And it wasn't just Samantha, it was a lot of people. You know, you'd think at this particular time it would sort of draw people away from the religion, but people were bringing up mosques, they were bringing up preachers, they were asking for copies of the Quran because they were finding copies of sermons that were made by the clerics and the preachers who preached the hate. And they're saying, okay, well, we're just following what the Quran says. And people wanted to read the Quran and have a look, see if the Quran actually said all this. And it doesn't. It doesn't make any sort of reference to these claims whatsoever. A year later, aged 18, Samantha attends a school called the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and she ends up gaining an A on religious studies. But she fully drops out during this, after getting her A, to fully revert into becoming a Muslim. So you notice that I said revert, and the reason for that is just a respect thing. So if you didn't know, Muslims actually believe that everyone in the world was born a Muslim. So when, for example, a westernized white person will go into the religion, who haven't been brought up in the Islamic belief system, but they later, down the line, they go into the religion. They call it a reversion because they were born a Muslim and they're coming back to it. So for me, it's just a respect thing. I understand, obviously, people call it converting, and that's totally fine. I know some other channels call it converting when they speak about this particular faith, but for me, I will call it reverting. So she fully reverts to Islam, and obviously, like I said earlier, her parents had brought her up as Christian, and this really, really upset her parents, so they end up cutting contact with their daughter. But this doesn't deter Samantha. She ends up gaining a appreciation for a man named Sheikh Abdullah Al Faisal, who was a revert from Jamaica. He was one of the hate preachers that I spoke about earlier, and he preached about the extermination of enemies of Allah, and that would be people like myself, a homosexual man, or a homosexual woman. He preached about the extermination of apostates. So an apostate is someone who grew up in a particular religion, but they later on down the line leave that religion for whatever reason. And they are probably seen as one of the worst of the worst in a religious person's eyes. Not so much with Catholics and Christians. It's a word that's really, really commonly used in the Jehovah's Witness faith. But obviously Muslims, they use it as well. But the biggest one is the Jehovah's Witness faith. He also preaches about the extermination of Hindus and Sikhs, because for some reason many territories that support who follow Islam, they don't like Hindus and Sikhs and vice versa. I'm not sure in the history there. If someone wants to comment down below, then you can let me know. So he later gets sentenced for 4 years for these hate speeches. He was telling his followers, if you do see a Hindu or a Sikh on the streets, you are legally allowed to go and kill them. So he ends up serving time at HMP Long Lartin. And not long after his release, after the 4-year sentence, he's still doing world tours, and he then gets sentenced to quite a long sentence this time, 18 years in January of 2023, and this was on terrorism charges. So it's during one of his tours of the UK, Al-Faisal meets a young man called Jermaine Lindsay, and a copy of a DVD of one of his sermons gets sent to Samantha. Samantha, she becomes fully involved in this, and she's following every word he says. She's also copying the DVD and sending it out to her friends, and she's telling her friends, okay, but he's not as bad as what people are making out. Like, you need to listen to this guy. It's something that we all do, you know. We, not in regards of obviously hate speeching, but we find something that we like and we forward it on to our friends. We're like, oh, you need to listen to this, you need to watch this, blah, blah, blah. And this is particularly what she's doing. She doesn't realise what rabbit hole she's actually going down. But it's something that we all do. We all send things out to our friends. So, like I said, he meets a 17-year-old boy called Jermaine Lindsay. So Jermaine was born on the 23rd of September 85. He was born in Jamaica and he moves to Britain in 1990. So Jermaine had followed his mother into reverting to Islam. And a year later, in 2002, he marries a 29-year-old woman called... I don't know what she was called, sorry. Misread that. But yeah, he marries a 29-year-old woman from Ireland, so he was 18 at this particular time. And not long after, he expresses wishes to marry a second woman, have another wife, have a third wife, maybe a fourth. And his first wife was like, yeah, mate, that's not for me. Like, do one, I'm off, see ya. And within 8 days, their divorce comes through. They're finalised, and he's suddenly a free agent again. Now, believing them to be a match, Al-Faisal actually gives Samantha's contact details to Jermaine. And he sets this up quite cleverly, and Jermaine ends up plucking up the courage and he sends Samantha an email. Because they're closer in age, both fairly new reverts to the Islamic faith, or the darker side of the Islamic faith, should we say. And they begin having conversations that stretch over a period of time, and eventually this leads to them meeting for the first time. And this particular meeting, it happens at a Stop the War protest. So after dropping out of university, Samantha and Jermaine, they have a small wedding ceremony in someone's front room. This particular wedding, her parents completely refuse to attend it. The couple then start using the Islamic names Abdullah Shahid and Sharafaya. And not long after, Samantha then falls pregnant and she gives birth to a son. And this was in April 2004. Now, during this time, Jermaine later meets another man called Mohammed Sadiq Khan. Just to make it clear, I'm not talking about the Mayor of London when I talk about Mohammed Sadiq Khan. And eventually these these meetings, they turn into full-fledged plans of a terrorist attack in London. So the day comes on the 7th of July 2005. Jermaine, he gets up, and at 5 a.m. he's spotted at Luton Station. He is seen walking around for about 2 or 3 hours, and a few hours later he meets up with other men, and one of these include Mohammed Sadiq Khan. He then boards a train to King's Cross, and the group will separate at this point, and they all get on separate trains. And while Jermaine's train is travelling through the underground, he detonates his bomb, and this obviously kills himself and 26 innocent people instantly. So 2 other bombs were detonated on separate trains, and the 4th was on the number 30 bus, and this was in Tavistock Square, and this brought the fatalities up to 52 victims, plus the 4 terrorists. Now, Samantha at this time, she was heavily pregnant with her second child, and 6 days after the 7/7 bombings, she contacts the police to report Jermaine as missing. She was then later paid £30,000 by the Sun newspaper for an exclusive interview. Now, in the interview, she's condemning Jermaine for his actions. She's saying that the Jermaine that you all know, the Jermaine that has done this attack, he's not the Jermaine that I married. You know, he's a completely different person. She's asking that everyone believes that she's innocent. She's saying that obviously she's now got to raise her children in the knowledge that one day she's got to tell them who their father was. People don't buy it. People are not buying this interview. You know, the word on the street is that they're just saying there must have been some way she would have known. And it turns out she did. She knew full well what was going on. She followed Sheikh Al Faisal, for fuck's sake. And in retaliation for this interview and the 7/7 attacks, the family home is petrol bombed by 2 teenage boys, which obviously I do not condone whatsoever. You know, no matter how deeply upset everyone was, how angry everyone was, at the end of the day, she did have she was heavily pregnant and had a young son at the time. I get, obviously, feelings get in the way of common sense, and obviously these were 2 young boys. She's then placed into police protection, and she goes on to give birth to a daughter. So it was later discovered Samantha was also a frequent visitor to Mohammed Sadiq Khan's house, and this was along with Jermaine. So this obviously gives us the first insight into that she knew what was going on. She knew and picked up knowledge of how to prepare and make a bomb. Samantha is then placed into a housing estate in Aylesbury, and it's believed here that she makes a reconciliation with her parents. Her neighbours believe her mother had also reverted. As one neighbour, she spoke out during a TV interview, and she said that her mum would often be helping Samantha with the shopping, bringing it up the stairs, and she would basically be a mirror image of Samantha, even down to the way she used to wear her headscarf. Obviously, I'm aware that they don't call it a headscarf, but I don't really understand the full terminology of what they use for their clothing. I know, obviously, burqa and things like that, but some of it has all different names, like niqab and whatnot, so it's just hard to remember which one's which. So when I say headscarf, I'm not being deliberately offensive. So, not long after this, the family then take a short family vacation to Disneyland in Paris. And other than her parents, the only other frequent visitor were journalists. Now, they would be going around, they'd be knocking on everyone's door, and they're just basically asking for any dirt to be dished on Samantha. And Samantha knocks on the neighbour's door. She's expressing and pleading with her neighbours not to say anything to the journalists. So, at this time as well, during this whole time is going on, Samantha, she starts expressing wishes that she wants to meet another husband. So during 2007, so during his incarceration for his hate speech, Samantha was in regular contact with Sheikh Al Faisal in Long Lartin. He describes her as jovial, happy, and overall really pleasant. You know, she would ring up and ask him if he had money, and asked him if he needed money, and if there was anything else that he needed. Now, he's released not long after this, and he's deported back to Jamaica. And in 2008, he decides to go on to another tour. So he's taking his hate message around the world yet again. He visits South Africa to preach, and he becomes acquainted with a young man called Fahmy Salim. Now, Fahmy was born in Hounslow, and which is obviously in East London, and he moved over to Mombasa in Kenya. So, eventually, him and Fahmy are talking. Fahmy expresses a wish, to marry a white sister from the UK, and immediately Sheikh Al Faisal, he's like, got a perfect one, Samantha. So he rings up Samantha and he's like, okay, I may have potentially found you a husband. He puts them in contact, and for the next 6 weeks, Samantha and Fahmy are talking, and she finds out that he's been injured in a battle. In excerpts from a small diary that they found, which we get to a little bit later down the line, she says, "Glory be to Allah, he was injured in a battle against Allah's enemies." So there's a little bit more to that later that we're going to get into. And at the drop of a hat, Samantha literally picks up all her stuff, packs it up, jumps on a plane, and flies over to Johannesburg, which is in South Africa. Like, bearing in mind, Mombasa is North Africa. Literally, the day after touching down in Johannesburg, Samantha and Fahmy are married. Not long after the marriage, she's pregnant, and she goes on to give birth to a son in July of 2009. She gives birth back in the UK. She's come back for a brief visit of her family, and she goes into labour and gives birth in Stoke Newington Hospital. Now, while living in Johannesburg, she's renting a small house in a suburb, and neighbours said that Samantha would often be seen driving around in a big white Mercedes. She's handing out sweets to the local children. They all said that Fahmy seemed to be away on some sort of various business trips. And it was reported that Fahmy was being supported by a man named Junaid Duckrat. And Junaid ran a hunting shop and a dental surgery. And he's basically, during an interview, or an attempt of an interview, he refuses to give any information over about Fahmy and Samantha. So there's an interview that I found from about 2013, I believe it was. And Junaid just he's up in his dental surgery, and the interviewers obviously spoke to the receptionist, and she's come back down with messages basically saying, okay, he doesn't want to see you, he doesn't want to talk to you, he doesn't want to acknowledge you. So nothing can take place, but obviously just means he's got something to hide. He knew at this point where Samantha was. At this point, Samantha was in hiding. Within a few months of giving birth to her third child, Samantha falls pregnant again. And exactly a year to the day of her third child being born, she gives birth to her fourth child, this time a daughter. So she pays £380 to a birthing centre for a water birth, and this was in Johannesburg. A midwife said that Samantha arrived in a niqab. So a niqab is the full head covering, and obviously the face where you literally just see the eyes. It's got like a little string on the bridge of the nose, and that obviously just sort of keeps the opening completely open. During this time, Farmy was operating a shipping business. So he was shipping medical supplies in and out. And Samantha was an assistant manager to a halal pie factory. But it was also evidenced that she was linked to elephant poaching. So for those of you who are not 100% sure what elephant poaching is, I wouldn't really understand how you wouldn't know what it is, but it's just basically the removal of elephants' tusks. They're shot, or even worse than shot, and the tusks are removed and they're left to bleed out to death, and the tusks are sold for an incredibly high price. So obviously the tusks are made of ivory, and ivory is a really, really sought after thing. Like, everyone's here, but it also does happen to rhinos, which is why rhinos are incredibly endangered. And every now and then, hippos, they're also taken and slaughtered for their teeth, because their teeth are ivory. So it was said that she was using her elephant poaching to fund terrorism attacks, to fund the terrorists. It was later found during this time Samantha was also using a different identity. She had faked the identity, and she possessed documents showing the name Natalie Faye Webb. Now, the real Natalie Webb, she worked as a nurse, and Samantha must have come across her and saw some sort of similarity, and she could probably use Natalie's photo maybe and be able to get away with it. Now, under the name of Natalie, Samantha used this name to obtain credit cards, and she rings up debts equaling to about £5,000. Now, in August of 2011, Samantha moves with her husband back to Mombasa, and not long after arriving here, police raid a house, and they find a bomb factory within the house, and they arrest 5 people. Now, only one person turns up to the trial, and one of the people that didn't go, that should have been there, that was arrested at the time, was Samantha. Now, the person that did show up, his name was Jermaine Grant. Jermaine was originally from Barking in East London, and he also, like Samantha, was using someone else's identity. He possessed a Canadian passport under the name of Peter Joseph. Now, when questioned by police, Jermaine tells them that the leader of this terror cell was Samantha Lewthwaite. And after a little bit of digging, police become aware that they already know Jermaine. So he was arrested back in 2008 at a refugee camp trying to travel to Somalia, and he was wearing a burqa at the time, along with 2 other men also dressed in burqas. But only 6 hours after the arrest, The police station in Kenya is raided by over 20 men, or what they believed were 20 men. They were described as Al-Shabaab fighters, and they demand the release of Jermaine Grant and the other two men. And upon closer inspection, the police noticed that among this big group of men was a woman. And that woman, she was identified positively as being Samantha. So it was alleged during the call that Jermaine and Samantha had conspired together. And like I said, she was due to also be appearing in court that day, but she didn't turn up. During the raid, hydrogen peroxide, battery acid, and batteries were found. And these were the main ingredients that were used in the bombs for 7/7. And obviously, as I already spoke about, Samantha's first husband was one of the 7/7 bombers. She has knowledge of the bomb making. Now, in the autumn of 2011, police raid another house in Mombasa, and this is where Samantha was rumoured to have been living. And indeed, once they perform the raid on the house, they find a very small red suitcase hidden away. Inside this suitcase is Samantha's real birth certificate, displaying her full name, where she was born. So police got a lot of information on her at this point. They look at her computer, and the only other evidence that they found, it was nothing to do with terrorism. She was looking at weight loss surgeries, weight loss tips, but also bizarrely she was visiting a Beyonce website. Now, obviously, it wouldn't surprise you that she was looking at sort of weight loss tips, because she's had four children, really, really close together in age. Obviously there was a year or a year and a half between her first two children, and exactly 1 year between child 3 and child 4. And obviously a lot of women do go through that up and down with how they feel about their body after they've given birth. They're joyful that they've got this thing in the world. They've brought something into the world. They've grown a human inside them. They're absolutely ecstatic. But obviously the body has gone through a lot of things, and they just feel a little bit crap about themselves. So it wouldn't be that unusual for a mother to be looking at that kind of thing. The Beyonce website, I don't really understand. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I may be wrong here, but the Muslim people that I've spoken to in the past, a lot of them don't listen to music. Apparently it's something that they're not allowed to do. And like I said, I might be wrong, so if anyone has any more information on that, please let me know down below. But that was my sort of understanding, what I took away from that. It may not be all people that follow the faith, it might just be a select few. I'm not 100% sure. So I also find her diary. So obviously something that I spoke about a little bit earlier. She's making a lot of assumptions about fighting in Allah's cause. A lot of things about terrorism, how obviously people have gone over and fought in Allah's name. But she also talks about being the Muslim sort of goddess, housewife, whatever you want to call them, and having her children clean, have food prepped when her husband gets home after fighting in Allah's name. So it's kind of a little bit of a juxtaposition with this diary, but a lot of it does allude to the fact that she is knee deep in shit with the terrorist group. They also find plans for a pregnancy exercise class that she was calling Pregicise. So she was going to be leading pregnant women in Nairobi and Mombasa who were pregnant to prepare themselves, prepare their bodies for the marathon ahead of giving birth. And it was just basically described as a really safe and ethical way of pregnant women exercising, which we're all for. Now, it was later found out that whilst living in this particular house, Samantha was also renting a second house. So they find the details of the second house. They go there. The landlord, he recognises a photo of them from the family picture that they took of the birth of the fourth child. And he reveals that Farmy was using the name Marco. Marco was a man who was born in Mozambique. And the landlord says that he felt that they behaved really, really strangely. And in the end, they ended up owing thousands and thousands in rent arrears. And Farmy then basically messaged him and said, okay, we lost your details, but can you send them back over to me and I'll make sure you get them paid by Christmas 2011. Landlord does this, no problems asked, sends over the details, and that's when he hears nothing back. So, December 2011, this house is raided, and Samantha and Farmy were already gone at this point. What they've left behind was over 100 rounds of ammunition in the house. They found that the toilets and the drains were backed up and clogged up with old mobile phones and SIM cards. On the 20th of December 2011, Samantha, she was said to have been in Kisawami, Mombasa. Police were on her trail and they follow her to Farmy's mother's house. Senior officers, they enter and they find a woman staying there, using the name Natalie Faye Webb. So this woman, telling the officers that she's called Natalie, she said that she's a tourist from South Africa. And somehow she persuades the police to drop anything they've got against her. In a small bag, police found 2 million Kenyan shillings. This was equal to about £13,500 at the time. So it's not clear what actually happened after this, but like I said, somehow the woman pretending to be Natalie Faye Webb, she's persuaded the police to let her go. Now, the last person to have ever seen Samantha was her sister-in-law, a woman called Nazim Jamali Salim. Now, Nazim was the wife of a man called Musa Hussein, who was described as the lieutenant of Harun Faisal. Now, these two were responsible for the 1998 East African bombings. This was at a British embassy in Africa, and this resulted in the deaths of a number of people. I couldn't find the exact figure of how many people were killed and injured in this attack, but it was very, very serious. I've seen the footage of it. It's very, very distressing, but I couldn't find an exact number. Harun and Musa, they were also trusted confidants of Osama bin Laden, with Harun also being privy and part of the plans for the attack of 9/11. Both Harun and Musa, they were shot dead in June 2011 in Somalia. September 21st, 2012, a shopping centre in Nairobi. This is attacked in a 4-day siege with masked gunmen. They shoot dead 67 people. These include women, children, men, like anyone who got in the way, anyone who's trying to see escaping, they are shot dead. And 4 days later, the masked gunmen are believed to have killed themselves. And it's believed that Samantha, yet again, was responsible or part of the planning for this attack. But when they look back on the CCTV, Samantha is not seen anywhere near the building. However, it's later believed that she's given maternal support and equipment to the gunman. I just want to point out that is probably more of a plausible explanation than her being part of it, or being the leader of it, shall I say. Mainly because the kind of men that do these kind of attacks, I don't see them as being submissive to a woman, if I'm completely honest. I might be wrong, but in my heart of hearts, I believe that she played a more maternal role in it rather than a leadership role. So not long after this is when Samantha's placed on Interpol's Most Wanted, and she's then also linked to a 2012 attack on a bar during the Euros 2012, and this was in Mombasa. So a woman who was matching Samantha's identity, she's seen floating around the bar nearby, and all of a sudden a grenade is detonated, and this kills 3 people and injures 25. After this, nothing is heard. Samantha just completely vanished off the face of the earth. Reports stated that in June 2014, reliable information was posted that Samantha was in Kenya. Reports have stated that a woman matching her description was then taken in by police. And this was in a place called Lamu. Now, this woman was reportedly intending to visit an army base in Somalia, but she was later denied any entry. However, the allegations were then denied by Lamu police. They're saying that this has never happened, but they did say that a woman in question who was reportedly looked like Samantha, she was indeed taken in, but they realised that she was actually a woman from Spain, and that she was just basically gone the wrong way or whatever, and she eventually was returned home. So this was the last known sighting, or the believed sighting, of Samantha. Like I said, she has been hiding really, really well for the past 10 years. So it's believed that she's been held in a remote location in either Somalia or Tanzania, and this is in a compound behind barbed wire. So it's very similar to, if you guys, I mean, obviously we all remember the story of Shamina Begum. So she, for those of you who don't know, those of you who are not in the UK, Shamima was a 15-year-old girl, along with a couple of her friends, who began watching ISIS terrorism videos online, and how they done it, I do not know to this day, but they managed to get planes to go over to Turkey. Once in Turkey, they end up getting married, and they start supporting their husbands who are fighting as part of ISIS. Now, in 2019, I believe it was, Shamima was actually found alive in a refugee camp, and we all saw that footage. I mean, she's still there to this day. We all saw that footage. She looks, just a sea of people being held, living in tents behind a barbed wire compound. How they found Samantha, I never know, but yeah, I think it was just by pure luck. And sadly, she's lost her 3 children living there. All died from infections, very young. Very, very sad, but obviously this has resulted in her having her UK citizenship and I believe her Bangladeshi citizenship being revoked, which means now she's basically stuck in this place. And I believe this is what happened with Samantha, if I'm honest. I believe that her UK citizenship, that would have been taken away as well. And she knows that she's wanted. She knows full well that she's a wanted person if she's still alive. Her uncle, funny enough, he strongly believes that she is dead. He's said so in a 2022 interview. That obviously no one's heard hide or hair of her, and he's strongly in the belief system that she has died in this refugee camp. But I don't know. If I'm honest, I don't know. I hope not, because otherwise there'll be no way of bringing her to justice. But that's all pie in the sky, if I'm honest. I don't think she'll ever come into justice. She will just live out the rest of her days in this stinking hole. So that is the end of today's story. I hope there's something that you guys weren't aware of. I hope anyone who does follow the Islamic faith, if they do come across this video, I hope that I've been somewhat respectful or fully respectful of your belief. If I've been wrong about anything in this video, please feel free to leave a comment down below. But don't waste your time putting anything negative. I have been reading the comments, I've come across a few. Don't bother wasting your time anymore, or wasting my time or anyone else's time. If you want to leave something constructive, feel free. That's great, and I will read it and get back to you. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one and you've learned something new about, if you were aware of who Samantha Lewthwaite was. So, with all that said and done, have a fantastic Christmas, have a great New Year, and I will see you very, very soon for the next true crime story with Silhouette. Take care, guys, and I'll see you very soon.